Welcome to Mares of Macha, the breeding podcast. Mares of Macha is led by the concept that the most performant and best performing bloodlines in show jumping should be made available to all breeders across the world. That is access proven breeding. And with this podcast, we go one step further. We want to bring you into the minds of the world's most leading people in our industry, whether it is about sport or about breeding. And the best part, it is not me nor the Mares of Matcha team asking the questions. No, it is you. Many of you have sent us lots of questions. What is on your minds about breeding and about your breeding program? That way, you have direct access again to proven breeding. Our first guest in this podcast is Ingmar de Vos, the president of the FEI, the International Equestrian Federation. Now, that might sound like somewhat of a remarkable choice to pick somebody who runs the sport, yet not the breeding industry. But in the next hour or so, you will get insight into how the FEI looks at breeding, what the sport is going to look like in the next 10 years, and in which kind of an industry that your homebreds will compete in. Join me for an insightful conversation with Ingmar de Vos, president of the FEI. Ingmar, you have been at the helm of international equestrian sport for more than 15 years, first as Secretary General, then as president of the International Equestrian Federation. But why should people listen to you when it comes to breeding?
Well, first of all, I cannot oblige people to listen to me. But I think that sport and breeding have a lot in common. The one cannot without the other. Sport because we need horses, we need good horses. And breeders and the ideas of breeders and of the stud books have drastically improved the products and the quality of the horses. So they are very important for us as a sport. But I believe that sport is also very important for the breeders because in the end they breed sport horses for the sport market. Sport is important to evaluate their products and to develop a vision on the future and to make further improvements. So I'm sure that they also use a lot the results of sport competitions, even the videos like on Clip My Horse, to improve their products. So I think we are together. And I must say, over the last decade, we have developed very good relationships also with the World Breeding Federation of Sport Horses. We created the FEI WBFHA Council, where we discuss topics together, and we had just a meeting a couple of weeks ago. So, no, all in all, very important and a very important partnership.
You just referred to the future. You as an FEI president also guide our sport towards the future. Where are we going? For a breeder who has a foal born 2026, maybe 2027, where do you think our sport will be in the coming years? For example, that foal that is born now in 2026, in what kind of an industry you think will it compete in, say, 2038?
I hope still in a growing industry. We have seen a tremendous growth over the last 10, 20, 30 years. I would even say exponential, not only in terms of international competitions in all the different disciplines, but also in number of people practicing the sport, and not only internationally, but also nationally and regional. We see an incredible development in some other parts of the world. We need to recognize that in Europe, the sport is maybe stagnating, but it was already at a very high level. But we see a tremendous development in Asia, in Latin America, North America. So there is certainly a future. But what the sport will look at in, I would say, 10 years, I don't know. I'm not Madame Soleil, as they say in French. I cannot predict the future. But there are some trends that we see clearly. When I see, for instance, in dressage, the horses become more and more relaxed. They are much less stressed, or they should be able to compete under much less stressful situations. So the relationship is becoming more normal, I would say, more natural. And this is a very positive development, but it's probably a development where breeders need to think about, because it means that we need basically easier horses, maybe horses with a easier mentality, not the difficult horse that fights in the competition. So that is an important trend. It will be more technical. We have seen that already in show jumping. Where is the limit? I think although we could do that practically, but I don't think it would be a good thing to keep building higher and higher. I think we reached the limit, but it can be more technical. We see that the fences become lighter, playing with colors more and more. The time allowed is more and more an element. Time becomes really an element of the course, all to make it more technical, more practical. If I remember the World Equestrian Games in '90, and I never forget in Stockholm.
Stockholm.
And I never forget the jumping competition there. There was still the competition with the big, strong horses that before every fence gather the horse together and jump. And now we see horses that are doing their course like ponies used to do, always ahead. So it's a completely different sport, more careful, lighter horses, I think, in jumping. But in all disciplines, it changes. Like if we look in endurance, we see also that speed, of course, is important. But we see that the organizers are, even in the desert, are making much more technical courses in order to reduce the speed. And by doing that, thinking about the welfare of the horses. And this will be the red line through everything is horse welfare. So we need to think much more about this, about the well-being of the horse, and the sport will adapt accordingly. And breeders need to be aware of that and need to take that into account, I think.
It is a breeding podcast, and I find it fascinating that you straight away draw similarities with dressage and even with endurance, which I would never have done. So it's also a very interesting perspective. Sport as a general, I read a quote, I think it was from JP Morgan recently, about one of their large councils, where they indicated that with the introduction of AI into our society and how our society is changing, sport will actually become even more important for many people. With that context in mind, will that also have an impact on show jumping? Not that we will ride our horses through AI steering, but just the value of sport and working with horses in general?
Absolutely. And I think it's nothing only to do with artificial intelligence, but it has to do with a society that becomes more and more urban. And equestrian sport is one of the sole sports that makes a connection with the nature, with an animal. And that makes us unique. That made us already unique in the past. But I think in an evolving society where not only artificial intelligence, but also the fact that more and more people go back to the city, urban sports there become more important. But with the kids all the time on the phone and on the games and the thumb sport, I call it, the need, a certain moment, it's always like a balance that comes back. And I think equestrian sport has a lot to offer to the future generations, because it's one of the sole sports where they can make a real connection with the nature and create a bond with an animal. So I think we have a very big future. We see that also when we look at the figures on how many people follow our sport, how many fans we have, what potential of fans we have. We have done these independent studies, and they revealed, even to us, where we thought we were only a niche sport, revealed that we are a global sport and that a lot of people are interested. Then look at television. How many series do you have now where still horses are involved? More and more, I would say. So back to the nature, back to the horse. And that's good for our sport and for our breeders.
You made a very interesting comment earlier. We said maybe sport, maybe, in Europe is stagnating, but it is growing globally. There is a need, then if the sport grows globally, there is a higher need for horses. However, If you look at Germany over the last 2 years, 18% less foals are bred. Holland is also down. We don't have the numbers on France exactly. Is it a concern that despite our sport growing, and that is also through the contribution of the FEI to increase the presence of our sport, is it a concern that maybe, I have to be careful how I phrase it, but that we might run out of breeders, maybe horses?
Well, we certainly share that concern. We see that a lot of riders, owners are desperate to find horses to compete in, especially, of course, Grand Prix. The search for Grand Prix horses is becoming a fight. It's the war for the Grand Prix horses with all the financial implications that it has. But, I give you an example. In China, 2011, go for the first time to mainland China. There were barely 30 equestrian clubs in whole mainland China. Now there are over 3,000 equestrian clubs
Times 100.
over a period of 15 years. So this is an exponential growth. Chinese bought a lot of horses from Europe. Bought a lot of horses. They were not always happy. Let's be honest. Our industry has not only been treated unfair because they didn't have the knowledge. This is the reason why we, with our FEI Solidarity Program, we really work on education in all parts of the world, but in China specifically, on educating veterinarians, coaches, riders, judges, officials, because we want them to build their own knowledge. But they are breeders. I visited last week, I was in Urumqi. That's in the Xinjiang province, which is an incredible breeding region. It's the biggest province of China. It's in the central north. They are looking for breeding of competition horses. So it has a lot of potential there, I believe, for the breeders. Maybe not to fly in the horses, but to produce there and to buy the semen from the European bred horses. That's a really big opportunity. So I think there is a stagnation in Europe, but not necessarily in breeding. In sport, we see that, but in breeding, I think when you look at the products that are competing at the highest level in show jumping, for instance, but also in dressage, a lot of European breeding. And if you look even to the bloodlines behind, it's probably all European breeding. So there is still a future, maybe not in the production. The production could maybe take place in other parts of the world because it's cheaper to ship semen to other parts of the world than to ship horses. But I think there is still a big future for breeding in Europe.
It's fascinating what you've just mentioned. I never heard the story about the sport horse breeding in China. On a side note, there are a lot of Australian bred horses currently doing very well at 5-star show jumping level. I think the numbers in Brazil have actually doubled. Still not a huge market. You as an FEI president, you travel all over the world. Just before we recorded this podcast, you told me how many days you were on the road and which countries you will still visit in the next coming month, and it's mind-blowing. Do you pick up anything there from breeding? What happens? Do you see other regions that really develop or that show interest in breeding? That is not just France, Belgium, Holland, Germany, and a few other countries?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, the question in China came basically from a discussion we had with the Minister of Agriculture and Regional Affairs, Mara Minister they call, because they are very clever. In China, they understand that we are an industry. They understand we are not only a sport. There is a whole industry behind it, and breeding is an important part of the industry. So they are thinking, why do we import so many horses? Why do we import every year 10, 12,000 horses, which is very expensive? Why can we not produce ourselves? This is a bit typical Chinese approach. They do that also in other industries. They are very good in stealing ideas and even plagiate. But it makes sense because they have the regions. I mean, China is a tremendously big country. It has the regions where the grassland is perfect for breeding. They just don't have the know-how, and they want to build up that know-how. But they also understand, when they look at the statistics, they also understand that the products to breed must come from Europe to start with. In the end, of course, they will call it their own breed. And they have this famous yearling horse, which when you look at it, you don't even know what it is. It could be everything, but it's a breed. But still, they will use a lot of European semen and products. And this is valid in other parts of the world as well. I mean, if you look Central Europe, Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, they have all the same potential. They just don't have really the know-how. They have a lot of know-how in breeding horses because they have a really an equestrian tradition, but they do not really have the know-how how to breed the high-level competition horses. The Grand Prix horse in dressage or the Grand Prix horse in show jumping.
Over the last couple of years, our sport has developed. I remember when people rode with back boots or with bits that are now unthinkable. But I cannot imagine that this is the end of the line of an evolution in terms of tack and material. Where do you think our sport from a technical perspective around the horse, tack, bits, etc., will develop towards, and what should a breeder take from that?
Yeah, I think I'm very happy that now we are really addressing this at the level of the FEI, because to be honest, it was without good communication tools, good IT, it was very difficult to follow all of that. And I can understand we had these manuals for officials to see what was allowed or was not allowed. But what people are inventing all the time, impossible to follow that. I mean, you see the most strange things in the mount of horses that you say never see it. Is it allowed? Is it not allowed? What does it do? So there is a development now that we have created this tack and equipment expert group. We have also developed a very good tack and equipment application, so where people can consult now what is allowed and what is not allowed. This is still work in progress because there is so much tack that needs to be considered, so many things that people have invented over all the years to help the horse, sometimes to help themselves, sometimes also to enhance performance, not always in the best interest of the horse. So it's really very important to have a very good expert group, which involves also active riders, trainers, coaches, to make the selection, to say, okay, this is what we want to see, this is what we do not want to see. This evolution will make it, I think, more clear what is allowed and what is not allowed. Hopefully, it will create much more transparency on what can be done and what cannot be done, which will limit the helps for horses, that we cannot overdo it. Hence, I think, as I said earlier on, we need horses that need less of all these assistance and still perform. So I think that is maybe a thing, an idea that the breeders need to take into consideration, is that they need to breed horses that need less of these assistance than maybe in the past.
There is also, if I have it right, quite an influence from the social license from people that do not understand our sport, that have to try to understand why we do things with our horses. And I have the feeling that a lot of our rule changes are also serve to explain to them what we are actually doing. But do you think we will continue on a trend to go even lighter on the, let's call it, the support of a horse?
Yeah, absolutely. And I see this evolution. I'm not going to give the name, but it's one of the top riders in dressage, where we had a couple of years of conversation. We said, listen, dressage is going wrong. I just created at that time the equine ethics and well-being group with our critical friends that made a whole report of where we should go to. that rider did not understand at that time when I said, listen, something needs to change because this is going the wrong direction. No, but the problem is at the lower level, not with us. Then we had the famous case of Charlotte Dujardin. Luckily, we had already 2 years of equine ethics and well-being working group in progress. So basically, we could use that case, regretfully, as an opportunity to explain what we were doing to the media, because of course all the media were stumbling over us in Paris. But it gave us an opportunity to demonstrate, one, that we were proactive, two, that we had solutions, and three, that we were severe. That whole thing changed the mentality. When I talk now today to the same rider, it is, and I see that rider is riding completely different. And when I see what Justin Verbomen is doing with his horse, it's incredible. That's completely the dressage that we want to see. And the good thing is that the officials also understood that they don't need to give points to the horse that is suffering and sweating, but that they need to give points to a horse that enjoys doing the test, that is relaxed, and where the combination is between the rider and the horse is incredible, and where they work together, you even don't see what they are doing in order to make it happen. So yes, to answer your question, less. So that's why we need horses that are much more or much less in need of assistance to do what they have to do.
Less is more. It feels like I've heard that phrase before.
Yes.
2038, maybe the dressage order that you were talking about, maybe some of the champions that will be crowned in a few days in Aachen will not be competing at that time. Hopefully, we'll have a new generation ready to take over and to be the kings and queens of our sport. How is our sport actually doing? Are we do we have a lot of riders that want to compete a lot at shows with a lot of horses, or do we also have a new group coming in? I want to know how are we doing in terms of youth? Is our youth group growing? Do we have more youth riders than, let's say, 20 years before?
Absolutely, and that's a very good development, and I think it has a lot to do with promoting the sport and promoting horsemanship and promoting what I call it's not a sport. It's a lifestyle. It's a passion. It is much more than a sport. I say to my colleagues from table tennis or tennis, you have a racket, you play, you train, you put it in a cupboard. You can forget about it for a couple of days if you want. With the horse, that's not a case. So it's a completely different story. But I think it's very attractive for the youth. Just to give you an idea. When we talk about youth, I talk about the category from ponies, children, juniors, young riders. I'm not talking about under 25. Do you know that almost 50%, 49.9% of the riders or the athletes that are registered every year in the FEI are youth? So that's incredible. And that's also very important when we share these figures with the International Olympic Committee, when we are discussing a position of the different sports and disciplines in the Olympic program. Attracting the youth is one of the key elements in evaluation of a sport. But to give you an example, over the last 10 years, so between 2015 and 2025, in dressage children, we had an increase of number of riders of 300%. In show jumping young riders, we had an increase of 180%. And in eventing ponies, 150% over the last 10 years. So it shows clearly in the Olympic disciplines that there is a growing number of youth athletes that are interested to compete at an international level. Another figure that is maybe a bit contradictory, but also interesting, is that we see that the number of events has increased tremendously, but we see also, like by 50% in generally speaking, but we see that the number of participation of the youth in these youth events is stable over the last 10 years. But we see then that there is an enormous increase of participation of these youth categories, and I'm not speaking about ponies or children, but of juniors and young riders in senior competitions. So they move much faster to compete in CSI 2-star, 3-star than basically staying in the CSI junior or CSI young rider category. So these are interesting developments, but it shows also, in my view, it's a positive development because they want much faster as a youth rider already to connect with the seniors and to go into a competition with the senior riders, which is a good thing because that's where they can learn the most.
Well, maybe not everybody watching this podcast or listening to this podcast will know is that, of course, you're on your third term as a president of the FEI. You were Secretary General, but before you were also president of a Belgian Equestrian Federation.
Secretary General.
Secretary General, apologies. And you were involved as an organizer. You were chef de mission for the Belgian team at the World Equestrian Games in Lexington. How have you seen, so you are deeply rooted in sport, in horse sport. Have you seen the development? How do you see the development of the level of those youth competitions?
Yeah, I mean, when I started in the beginning 90s, there was barely youth competitions, even on a national level. But that started to grow fast with the ponies. Juniors, young riders, La Botte d'Or, the Gouden Laars, was at the time one of the good initiatives in Belgium. So there were a lot of people that saw a lot of potential there to start organizing competitions for the youth nationally already. And then it started internationally because some of the riders, let's be honest, they had kids that also rode and they wanted to take their kids to the events. And that's basically where it started. And an organizer said, oh, you know, I remember myself doing that as an organizer. Okay, we will do 2 classes for the ponies or for the juniors so that the riders could bring their... And then some others came and then so started to grow. But this is crucial because we need the youth because youth is the future. And if we see it has such a big impact. I mean, I remember when in the 90s we went to World Cup competitions or to Nations Cup competitions. I mean, it was always the same riders. Always the same riders. You had the Nations Cup was a summer circuit in Europe, and then the World Cup was the indoor winter circuit, but always the same riders. Where did we find them? Always at a bar. And they were, you know, they were strong people.
Yeah, for those people not watching you point at the belly, maybe they were a little bit overweight.
Yes. If we look now at the athletes, if we look now at the podiums we have in World Championships, in Olympic Games, these are all athletes. They are fit. They go to the gym. When I go to the gym at the championship, I see always a lot of riders there because they are working on it. I always said to the riders when I was chef d'équipe in my team, I said, every gram you have too much, it's difficult for the horse because the horse has to pull it over the fence. So, yeah, it's important. We see this evolution and professionalism. Let's be honest. I mean, we see much more people that are professionally involved in their sport. There is also much more money in it now, and there is much more competition. Huh?
Quality-wise, I remember I went to European Championships, call it in Auvers. It was maybe, I don't remember, 2004 or something. And now 20 years later, I followed the recent youth championships. I think it was Hagen. Teutoburgerwald. I was blown away by the quality of riding, the quality of horses, actually also the difficulty of courses that were built.
No, absolutely. I mean, they are looking, of course, at their stars. Yeah. When they and they see what their stars can, and they say we can it also. And let's not forget, many of the top riders, senior top riders, are training these juniors and young riders. They have good horses. They have difficult courses. And again, as I said, 50% of our registered athletes are youth riders. So there is a lot of competition there. So competition improves the sport level. That's normal. You need to have a lot of competition in order to improve the level of the sport.
It is a fascinating number. So just to make sure that I have it right, half the number of registered riders within the FEI are youth riders, right? Within the youth categories.
Yeah.
That's incredible
Yeah,
because it's a much
49.9%
just
to be clear.
But
But next year probably 50.1.
But what is that? That is the group from 12 years old until 22, 21. So
21.
there's only a group of 10 years old, and from then it goes from 21 all the way up to 71, just
Yes.
to give it a name.
Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. There's a, I feel that you and or at least numbers are positive about the future of our sport, at least when it comes down to people in our sport and the people that will practice our sport athlete-wise.
Yeah, absolutely. I must say, we were very positively surprised by these numbers and also how they grow over the years. So the projection is that they will overtake, and this is the yearly number of registrations. So roughly, I would say we register above 40,000 athletes every year. Because the registration in order to compete. So they are also actively competing because you need to be registered in a year to compete internationally in that year. So we have over 40,000 athletes registered every year to compete in international events. So 50% of them, so 20,000 international, are youngsters.
That's a fascinating number, especially because their group is so small. They only have 10 years to sit within that group. Just a quick break. If you're also very passionate about breeding and you want to learn more, head over to the maresofmacha.com website. Discover what they do, what they can do for you, and discover their mares and how you can enhance your breeding program. That's all. Now back to Ingmar de Vos. Critics might say, yeah, but to compete, especially as a youngster, but also as a senior, let's say, in an international show that is only reserved for the lucky elite. That is it's no longer feasible with the rising costs of feed, veterinary costs, the cost of horses' prices, etc. For the common man, the everyday person, to work your way up into the international sport. It's something that you hear a lot. What do you have to say about that?
Well, I'm not going to deny that it's not a cheap sport. I made a reference to table tennis or maybe to tennis, but let's not forget, I spoke with my colleagues in the International Tennis Federation and in the International Table Tennis Federation. The lessons, if you want to become a good tennis player at an international level, the lessons you need to pay, the fees of the coaches you need to pay, the entries that you need to pay into competitions, and the longevity of the career, of the training and the intensity, it's a very expensive sport as well. So people sometimes think tennis is simple because you only need a racket and a ball. No. In order to become one of the best in the world, it's a tremendous investment. And I think I invite you to look at that movie of the father of the Williams daughter.
King, I forgot his name, yeah.
But on the other hand, and I mentioned it before, we are also an industry. So there are a lot of pathways for people with lesser financial resources to get there. And if we look at the podium of Olympic Games, World Championships, the majority of the people that standing on the podium are people that didn't do it because they have a lot of money, but they got that position because of the talent they developed. And that's the good thing in our industry is that also thanks to the breeders, thanks to competition of young horses, the fact that our horses, it takes some time before they are ready to go to the international competitions. But that offers a lot of possibilities for young people, also for older, but especially for young people, to train young horses, to ride every day, to work everyday horses, to be paid for it. And then one day, if they are really good, their talent is discovered, and then they get better and better and better horses, go to higher and higher level competitions, start to earn more and more money, sometimes get commissions when horses they have educated are sold, they maybe get a commission. So there is a pathway, there is a career pathway in our sport that is linked between the industry and the sport. So I think the fact that we are an industry allows a lot of athletes to be able to have access, and if they are really good, to get the chances to get to the top level. And there are many of that examples. I think you know yourself a lot.
No, I'm just going through the current Knowledge and FEI world rankings. Ken Farrington is number 1, doesn't come from a wealthy background. Richard Vogel is number 2, doesn't come from a wealthy background. Then there's Shane Sweetnam. Actually, if you look,
These are
they do not
talented.
come. Yeah.
They are there because they are talented, and of course they had sponsors, they had horse owners that entrusted them with their top horse. But it's because they were good and not because they had money. And now, look, some of them, they made a brilliant career. They became wealthy people because they did well. They rode well. They did good business with horses. They understand the industry, and they became happy, wealthy people. And that shows that our sport allows social mobility, which in not many sports is the case.
You've been, I've said it before, you've been in our industry so long. For me, in many ways, it feels like there is no better moment to be alive in our sport. And maybe I'm now being too positive, and I also want to be critical, but there is no better moment to be a breeder, a horse dealer, or a rider than before. 20 years ago, there was way less access into the top level competitions. 20 years ago, there was not as much access to good bloodlines, also through techniques, of course, than before. It feels like we are in an abundance of opportunities, and of course, our sport is also, I don't want to say under scrutiny, but under the looking glass, where people want to make sure that we do the things right. But I almost feel that we are focusing too much on the negative and not on the opportunity that our sport as an industry, which you point out, is actually currently providing.
Well, I cannot agree more. But it was really necessary when it comes to the license to operate. It was really necessary to do what we have done. And it will be work in progress, and we will always have to continue working on this, because perception of horse well-being, horse welfare will also evolve with the society. And we say what 30 years ago was acceptable is not acceptable anymore. Probably in 30 years it will be the same. So it is a concept that will evolve over the years, and we need to pay a lot of attention to it. It has been a bit too much in the public, in the day-to-day work. It became almost the only thing we spoke about for a couple of years. But it was necessary to create an awareness, first of all, with our community, because, as I mentioned before, not everybody was always aware that they were under scrutiny. I mean, everybody now has a camera. Everybody now can be filmed at any time. And we need to behave, and we need to do the right thing for our horses, especially for our horses, because that's our first priority. That awareness is growing, and we will continue to work on it. And we will also need the national federations to help us with that. And within the national federations, also the grassroots sport or the associations that are involved in that. But I think we are now there. We have a concept. We have the well-being evaluation. We have the strategic plan. We have the action plan. So this is now something that is rolled out, and that should make us fit for the future in that part. So we can now start to concentrate again on our core business, I would say, which is sport, but with a very good limitation of what is allowed and what is not allowed. So yes, I believe we are in a good place now. We see that there are markets opening in the world. One of the next markets that will open pretty soon, if they get their governance a bit back on track, is India. Let's not forget, there are more people living in India than in China. And Indians are very interested, again, also in equestrian sport. They also want to build on the tradition. Problem is there, it has been a bit too much controlled by the army. But now there are reforms going onwards in the National Federation, in the National Olympic Committee, to make the sport more accessible. And there, of course, we will jump in as an international federation to support this development, which then again will open doors for our industry, for our breeders as well, because they will need a lot of horses in India.
That's fascinating. I want to come back to the people who have we have an opinion about our sport. Somehow, and please tell me if I'm wrong or not, somehow I have a feeling that we are more under scrutiny from people within the horse world who have a different opinion on how you should ride, rather than the outside man who actually has nothing to do with horses. Do you think the everyday man in the street cares? Of course, they care about how we treat horses, but those with a critical voice, sometimes I feel that those are more often people from inside our industry than from outside our industry. Or is that wrong?
What I'm always saying is not the people that shouted the loudest that they are with a lot or that they are right. I always say, luckily, we have a very big, an overwhelming silent majority that is silent because they are happy with how things are going. And when we see, when we do these surveys with the general population about what is your perception of equestrian sport, then they say noble, say animal. It's all positive things. So I think you are right that there are maybe not immediate in our sport, but then there are people. I mean, there are people that are critical for everything. Especially now also with fake news and with the social media. And the problem is that nowadays an individual can have a tremendous big voice and reach a lot of people through all these channels and not always telling the truth or telling a story, fake news. These are all new developments that we see. So one person now can become much more vocal than it was in the past. And we need to put that in the context. So I think you're right that it is a very small minority of people, but they make a lot of noise. We need to make sure that we have a very solid plan, that we have a very solid rules and regulations, and that we have a good communication strategy. I know, for instance, that the IOC, the International Olympic Committee, gets regularly letters, mails of people that say you need to stop equestrian sport in the Olympic in the Olympic Games. I must say, what we do from our side is just we keep the IOC informed about all what we do, and they follow us. But as a president and as an IOC member, I'm since 2017 IOC member. I'm now a member of the IOC executive board. I never received a question from the IOC asking us what is happening there. Is there a problem? We never had that because proactively we also inform the IOC about all the initiatives that we undertake. And of course, the IOC is also involved in other sports where there are issues. Take what happened with boxing. I mean, they are confronted. Every sport has its critics. In our sport, it's mainly people that are criticizing because of horse welfare issues. In other sports, it's about the integrity of the sport. It's about the judging. So all sports have their critics, and they all need to be addressed in the best way possible.
I want to come back to the breeders. We are the Mayors of Macha breeding podcast. You, as president of the FEI, you have to deal with a lot of stakeholders, riders, horse owners, organizers, federations, grooms, and apologies to those that I've forgotten. You have to try to keep everybody happy, which is, in my opinion, one of the most impossible tasks. You cannot keep everybody happy. Where do breeders sit within do breeders sit at the table with the FEI?
I would say we have an agreement, a memorandum of understanding with the World Breeding Federation of Sport Horses, which basically is the umbrella organization of the stud books. I think they have like 150 stud books that are members. So we have a dialogue with them. Do we have a dialogue with the breeders individually? No, I would say. That would also be very, very difficult. But we have a relationship with them. But not like a stakeholder group, but more like an MOU with an existing organization. But we do interesting things. We are now doing some data exchange projects. For instance, all the German bred horses, that was the first pilot project that was in the framework of our cooperation with the World Breeding Federation of Sport Horses. We have now integrated all the data of the German-bred horses, because they are all gathered in one database in Warendorf. So we have now imported all that data into our data systems so that we can use the correct breeding information, like the sire, the mare, and all this kind of information, including the breeder, which before we relied basically on the National Federation to enter this information in our database. Many times they didn't have it, or they only encoded it partially. So with that data exchange, we are able to provide the relevant studbook with the data results of their registered horses, and we get the right information about the pedigree and the breeding, which improves a lot our database, but which also can render much better service to the breeding organizations and the breeders when they want to look at what is the best bloodline to continue, what are the results of it. So we are now expanding this also to the French, Celle Français, looking with BWP. So it is work in progress, but it is very important for the integrity of our databases, and it will allow us to provide better services to the breeders.
A breeder puts a foal on the ground, brings it up. Most foals get sold, and then the foal gets passed on, goes through different hands of ownerships and people who train it. And there is a very strong echo about breeders feeling left out at the moment that a horse competes at a higher level. Like you mentioned, very often not on the start list or half, never on a graphic. There was a very specific question about would there ever be, or is there consideration of showing also breeder data, the actual breeder's name, as a form of recognition at championship level? Are there plans? I know there's also been a recent conversation, I think it was with the World Breeding Federation, or at least raised by a Dutch journalist, saying, yeah, breeders should get a part of the prize money back. I'm not saying that you have to tell us how we're going to solve that problem. Do you feel something for the position of a breeder who, in a way, screams for a bit of recognition?
I fully understand. And I even support that request. There are two things you mentioned there. First of all, financial compensation for breeding the product, because I can understand the frustration with the breeders. You breed the horse, then you sell the foal, or even already before now with embryo and God knows what, and then it becomes a top horse, and then the big money, the big jackpot, and then you don't get anything of it. I fully understand that frustration. I know in the past there have been breeders' premiums. I remember it was in Belgium, Erik Wouters, who introduced it. It was never very successful because in the end we didn't have always the data of who the breeder was, because in some studbooks they even don't register the breeder. But it was also peanuts, because the price, it was based on the prize money, was not based upon the price where for the price that the horse was sold. And as a Belgian federation, it was not a lot of prize money, so it was always little amounts of money, but the principle was there. We have agreed because we in the framework of the FEI WBFHA Council, we had discussed in our last meeting the fact that breeders are breeding less and that breeders feel a bit left out. And we agreed basically, because the only solution is bring everybody together and look at the problem and see how I can solve it together. I mean, the FEI's role is not to impose a rule because somebody asks for it and then everybody else is against it. What we need to do, or what is the role, is to bring, in this case, the people, relevant people together, and to see, is there a solution that can be found? Are the riders, are the owners, are the dealers aware of this? Do they understand the needs of the breeder? Does the breeder understands the situation of the athletes and the owners and the trainers or the dealers? We need to bring them together. And we agreed, we have every year our sports forum in April in Lausanne. We agreed to bring the parties together in a specific session around what is the role of the breeder, how can the industry help or the sport help the breeder to get more value for his product. And so this is a dialogue that we are going to establish to talk specifically about this problem. I want to mention something about the graphics or the mentioning of the breeder. First of all, we as an FEI, we do a lot of work to make our databases, especially for like Olympic horses that go to championships, to make sure that we have all the correct breeding information and even add the breeder, because in many cases it's even not there or it's wrongly spelled, because in many stud book it's not related to a registration number, but it is a text field. So it can be Johnson in one, but the same guy Johnson, but then with an instead of an O, but meaning the same breeder, because it's all put in the text field. So we need to work on the integrity of the database. We have, and we present the breeder in our own on-screen graphics, like in World Cup, World Championships, Continental Championships, so the FEI named events, Longines League of Nations, World Cup, we show that because we have the data. By the way, every organizer has access to that data, but we really use it and we present it together with the groom, the owner, and the breeder. We can do that in the arena, in the field of play, because there the giant screens are big enough to do that. On television, it's much more difficult because graphics on television are very much more limited, and television broadcasters, they refuse very often too much data on the screen. They don't want it. The best example is Süddeutsche Fernsehen, ZDF. They also for Olympic Games, I don't know if you know, but the Olympic broadcast system has practically for every rights holder needs to adapt the graphics to what they want to show and what they do not want. IOC can put, or Olympic broadcast can put a full screen full with the graphics if you want, but then you don't see the competition anymore. But a lot of broadcasters only want to have the essentials. And that's where we have the problem. It's not that we do not want to show it, although we need to limit the data that you can show on the screen, especially now with people with smaller screens, tablets, or even looking at their phone. But it's in many cases it's the broadcaster that limits the number of graphics on screen.
That's an interesting insight, because I fully understand a breeder who says, if only they would once show my name, that I am the breeder of this horse that competed well, goes to the championship, won a medal at the championship. I understand their concern. It's fascinating to hear that there is a will, but there is not always a way. Yeah. Or the way is to do it on the big screen.
And we have the data, and the data will only improve the more we will have the data exchange project with other stud books, the more data we will have about the breeders, and we as an FEI who own all the data, we in the entries for the events, we own and we have all that data, and we provide it for free to whoever wants it. So if an organizer has a timekeeping, data handling system, they have all that data and they can provide that on the signal to the broadcaster. That's not a problem. It's just, are they able to use it? Are they able to enforce that the broadcaster uses it? Regretfully, that's a very difficult discussion.
I've got two more questions to finish this first session. In your opinion, looking at the sport, what would your advice be to a breeder? What should a breeder do? What should a breeder breed looking at the sport of 2038?
Okay, I'm not immediately the specialist, but I think I mentioned some trends, like we need horses that are basically easier, that need less external support, I would say. I think when I and I would love to breed, because I always say it's one of my plans when I retire is to start breeding a couple of horses just out of fun, because I have some ideas about bloodlines that I would like to combine, but I'm not going to talk about that today.
There are a few people that would love
But
to hear.
I think look at the data. Society now is built, and successful entrepreneurship is built on data. Look at the data. That's really important. Look at the results, but look also at what is all behind. So not only on the sports data, because sports data is always outdated. It can help something, but you need again back to look at what is the allure of the horse, what is the type, what is the horse doing. And then I would say, never forget to follow your intuition, because that's where breeders make the difference.
You've made a beautiful bridge to my last question. You said you wanted to start breeding when you retire. Is that retiring as FEI president, or retiring from all your professional endeavors?
Well, it will be a bit more when all things come to an end a bit.
Because at the end of the year, your third term as FEI president comes to an end. In your opinion, to summarize 12 years of Ingmar de Vos as president of the FEI, what are your successes, and maybe what are your failures? What are you proud of, and what, with hindsight, maybe should you have done differently?
Oh, maybe when we talk about achievements, first of all, I want always to say that I did it with a team, with a great team. I must say I was very happy to have always had a very good dialogue with our national federations, that the majority at least supported me also in difficult times. Very good board, but also a great staff. And I was happy to build on that staff, because it's different than when I arrived, of course. I think we have now very good people in very good positions there, which makes my life also easier. But I think the fact that our sport has grown is not because the FEI has done that, but at least we have facilitated it. We didn't make it more difficult for athletes or for organizers or for national federations. We helped them. We really rolled out our development program to support smaller federations in sometimes very difficult regions. We supported them with money, but also with technology, also with knowledge. So I think there we made quite a lot of progress, and that was successful. If we see now countries that 20 years ago would never be in the Olympic Games or in the continental games like Pan American Games or Asian Games, now they are there and they perform well. So this is a bit success also of our development program. Financial healthy organization, I must say. Some people criticized or thought that they criticized me to say that I run the FEI as a business. Sorry, I did so, but I think it's necessary to have a healthy business, because you can only deliver solid, sustainable services to your stakeholders. And as you mentioned, there are a lot, if you have the means to do it. Because we were able to overcome COVID, EHV, because other federations had only COVID. We had COVID and EHV. We survived that without any income for more than 1.5 years, and then even without income, supporting our national federations, not only by waiving the fees, but also by paying contributions. Continue at the same time investing in digital, because that was when, at that time, when we had nothing to show because there were no competitions, we had to provide content. We needed to keep our fan base. So we made a lot of documentaries around behind the scenes, behind the stables, which were very successful, where we learned from that they are more successful than competition content. And that's why we continue to do it. So we were capable during COVID to grow our fan base when there was even not a competition. We learned a lot from that. And we have a great digital team. We made a lot of progress there. We invested also. We made a choice to invest in digital, in social media, but also in IT. We have now all these platforms, and I'm particularly proud about the fact that I already said years before I came to the FEI that they needed to do was to have databases of all the horses, all the athletes that are competing in international competitions in a central system with a calendar and all the entries passing through the FEI, not from the organizer, not from the national federation to the organizer, no, through the FEI platform. And we have achieved that. And I must say, I'm pretty proud about that. And the last thing, maybe, but that's for me, that's really the future, is that we developed, and it was a very big investment, that was a strategic choice to make, was to develop the digital passport, which will be the tool to cross the borders in the future. This is the result of a partnership with the World Organization of Animal Health that have recognized the digital passport, which is part of a public-private partnership we have with them. But I'm very proud about it. We started it this year. It will become compulsory as from next year. But this will gather all the data of a horse, the whereabouts, the temperatures taking, the horse inspections, the vaccinations, the health papers, the blood tests, everything accessible through an app by also government officials, so that they can use that data that is solid to let the horse easy go over the border rather than having all this testing. And we are using this. 2 weeks ago, I was in Brisbane for the preparation already of the Brisbane 2032 Olympic Games, where we had in Canberra discussions with all the relevant authorities that are going over biosecurity, importation of animal stock, exportation, pre-export quarantine, post-arrival quarantine, customs, and so on and so on, quarantine zones, equine disease-free zones. We brought them all together to present our digital passport, and they were very much impressed, because I told them gave them one message. What we had to live in Sydney back in 2000, where the horses had to go for 1 week pre-export quarantine. In Aachen was it for the European horses, then fly to Sydney, then be there for 3 weeks in a post-arrival quarantine, but not allowing to compete. I mean, these horses were out of competitions for 6 months to compete in one Olympic Games, sometimes only in one class. That's not going to happen. If we want to motivate the best riders and the best horses to go to the Olympic Games, we need to give a very short time frame, which now everybody's common with. I mean, we have a lot of international competitions that are flying horses back and forth to all parts of the world. So we have really that knowledge, and we need to insist with Brisbane that they need to listen to us, and that they need to use the protocols that we have developed over the years. Digital passport will be key, and I believe this is a passport. We have already been contacted by over 30 other organizations that are interested, even to use it for other animals, because it's so unique. Other equestrian sports, of course, the racing industry, but also other stud books even. We had a very good conversation with the Spanish stud book that really wants to use the digital passport as being the digital stud book document for them, with all respect for the original stud book document, because the digital passport is not an additional passport. It's the digitalization of the existing passport. But that's a bit, I think, and I can go on, and I don't want to be, I'm always try to stay humble. My biggest deception probably is the conservatism of our community. I was a couple of times confronted with existential questions. For instance, the future of the Nations Cup was at stake. Our position in the Olympic movement, in the Olympic Games, was at stake. So we needed to reinvent ourselves. I must say I felt sometimes very lonely and not really supported by a very conservative group, mainly riders that do not want any change, which is logical because they were successful under an old system, so they don't want change. But we managed to do it. We have now completely... first thing I had to do was to introduce a final for the Nations Cup competition. That was the first time that we had a final in Barcelona. Everybody was against. Everybody declared me completely nuts. And then the first final was a big success, and everybody changed from 1 minute to another. More difficult was the change of the Olympic format, where we went from 4 teams in the 3 Olympic disciplines, from teams of 4 athletes or combinations with a drop score to 3 without a drop score. This was really absolutely necessary to do, and was for me at that time not always possible to explain everything behind it, because we got, of course, clear instructions also from the International Olympic Committee. But we did it, and I think thanks also that in the end everybody understood that we needed to work together on this, that we were successful, and we have now a very good format. And then again, when we had to go to the Longines League of Nations, the less is more, going to smaller, lesser number of competitions, but with more prize money, with more prestige. I think that was also successful, but also again not easy to do, and I'm still very grateful to Longines that they really have supported this on that road.
Okay. Ingmar, in a minute, Klaas or Meres van Macha is going to come and sit in that chair, and we're going to have another thought about everything that you've said. But I want to finish off by thanking you not only for coming to this podcast, the very first breeding podcast of Meres of Macha, but also for your contribution, like you described them, and for the things that you didn't describe yet to our sport. So thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
All right, so that was our conversation with Ingmar de Vos, president of the FEI, the Fédération Équestre Internationale. I'm sitting down now with Klaas De Coster, co-CEO of Meres of Macha. This was a conversation different than what many people would expect from a company that is involved in breeding. We invited probably the highest official or the man most influential in the sport of show jumping, but not in breeding. You as a breeder and as co-CEO of Meres of Macha, what do you take away from this conversation? What sticks?
I think positivism. Like if there's one word, it's positivism about the future of the sport. Because breeding is, as he actually mentioned very correctly, breeding for the sport. And if the sport is in a very good place, then that's very positive for show jumping. So I think that's really the main thing I take out of it. A bright sport future, which means a bright breeding future.
What struck me, and maybe I'm guilty myself, that we would look at sport from a very Eurocentric perspective, also looking at breeding very Eurocentric. The sport is stagnating in Europe on different levels. We'll talk about that in a minute. On the other hand, sport is growing outside of Europe, exploding even outside of Europe. Remarkably, apparently, also breeding is expanding outside of Europe. China, as he mentioned, India is sniffing. If my information is correct, the Brazilian studbook has almost doubled its numbers in recent years. Is that something that you also see within the company, maybe with your clients and your breeders?
Yeah, very clearly, I think. Last year the most Meres of Macha foals were born, and this year again we will have bred more than last year, or our clients actually will have bred more than last year. We see it very strongly in South America. Argentina, Brazil, two countries with a very strong breeding background, are looking to enhance their breeding portfolio. And we see that those countries go hand in hand with the sport that is getting stronger and stronger. So we've been going to those countries, I think, for the past 6 to 7 years. But even in those 6 to 7 years, we've seen the sport become more professional, and on the other hand, the breeding following that sport again. So yeah, it is very clear that we, as Europeans, and then for sure Belgium, France, Netherlands, Germany, Ireland, very strong breeding countries, very strong sport countries, and then this expanding to the rest of the world. We see that trend, which as a breeder, I'm happy about. Yeah.
It's a very interesting one, a remark that we should also consider in one of our upcoming podcasts. is the success of a nation linked to the success of its breeding? And of course, with the USA, it's a little bit different, but there's a lot of nations that do very well with their home breds. So if your breeding, your home breeding improves, does it also on long term have an effect on the sports result of your senior riders? Talk about senior riders and young riders. I was blown away by the number, and it was very specific about it. The 49.9% of riders with a license to compete for the FEI or within the FEI, 49.9% are younger than 21 or younger, while the 50.1% have an age group of 50 years. The other one only has an age group of 10 years. It's remarkable. It's a beautiful statistic. It's also very promising.
I think so too. And actually, we see that also with our clients. We see that more and more parents of younger riders invest in breeding because they want to have the good horses for their children if they grow up later. That's one thing. But on the other hand, as you guys talked about, I think, and maybe I didn't look at it enough before like that, but for sure, the future is in youth, because if youth continues to ride in the future in the 5-star shows, 4-star shows, 3-star shows, 2-star shows, then you need more horses like Ingmar was explaining. So then again, breeding becomes very relevant. It's the breeders that make sure that those horses are there for those people. So again, I come back to the positivism that I started off with. That's very positive, I think, for breeding. Yeah.
Last but not least, and it's a fascinating conversation. It says people blame me for running the FEI like a business, which is something that there's something to say for about breeding as well. And then when he talks about his advice for breeders, he says, look at the data. The businessman tells you to look at the data. How important is sports data within Mares of Macha?
I think it's the most important thing there is. With the mares, we only select the mares with 3 categories, or they jumped in the highest sport themselves, or they are mares mothers of some of the best horses in the world, or they come out of the few very exceptional breeding lines. So for us, it is all about data. And then, of course, feeling also. A horse where you have the feeling that it is just different. And then I can mention Carlina from Pius or Sancha from Daniel Blumen, or the horses from Van Eckerman that we have, or Peder Fredriksson. These are exceptional, different horses. So they, explain by data where their quality is, but then if you see them, if you feel them, if you go into the stable, if you go into the field in Italy where the horses are, you just feel these are different other type of horses. So I think data is for us that's where it starts, but then we look for the special horses, and I think it's indeed very important. And if you look at the future, if you look at sport, if everything is becoming more delicate, then at least the basis you start off needs to have the biggest chance of getting somewhere, I think. Yeah. So I think it's very important.
There is one more thing that we need to do in this podcast. A lot of breeders, but also just breeding enthusiasts or people that have reached out, have sent in their questions. There was a prize attached to a question.
Yeah, actually, we asked Ingmar if he could bring a prize, and he actually brought us 2 tickets to the finals in Aachen.
The World Championships.
Yes, correct.
Okay. We've got a lot of names. They are all in this bowl. All that we need you to do, Klaas, is to pick out one name. The winner for the tickets to the World Championships in Aachen is
Hanne Muldermans? Hanne Muldermans.
Hanne Muldermans, congratulations. The Mayors of Macha team will reach out to you to get those tickets to you so you can enjoy the finals it is of the World Championships in Aachen. That is an exciting prize. Klaas, thank you very much. It was a very interesting conversation with Ingmar de Vos, very interesting profile as well. See you next time, I guess.
Super. Thank you.
See you next time. We will have another conversation coming up with a person of interest from the sport or breeding industry. Keep a close watch on our social media channels, on our website as well, to find out who will be in that chair where Klaas is sitting now, where Ingmar was sitting just a few moments ago. And if you have questions, let them brew already in your mind. What is on your mind about breeding that we should ask our next guest? Thank you very much for watching, for listening. Speak soon. Bye-bye.